It was the summer of 1996, a time when my worldview as a scientist was grounded in hard evidence and logic. I was conducting research in the vast, dense forests of Oklahoma National Park. Though the land had evolved, parts of it still harbored indigenous tribes, with many people living in the remote forest areas, continuing their traditional ways. I had many interactions with the locals during my research, and one story that caught my attention was about the Snake Clan. The tribal people spoke of an ancient legend that said during a severe famine, a group of young men ventured deep into a forbidden part of the forest in search of food, ignoring the elders' warnings. 2 boys entered the cursed valley, but only one returned. That boy came back transformed, both in mind and body. Tribes people believed that he had turned into a snake and that every night he would shed his human form. Eventually, he disappeared, joining the serpent clan that resided in the Forbidden Valley. As a scientist, I was fascinated by the myth, but I dismissed it as mere folklore. Weeks passed, and I learned about a family that lived in the forest, the Thomases. They were wealthy landowners, despised by the tribal people for their history of cruelty toward them. The family had a reputation for mocking and even murdering indigenous people. Their land, sprawling and untamed, was a source of constant tension between the 2 groups. The rainy season had just begun, and the forest was thick with humidity and swarming mosquitoes. One day, my partner and I were in a marshy area when he suddenly shouted, "Look, a snake!" I was taken aback because, despite spending weeks in the forest, we hadn't encountered any snakes until then. The snake was unusually large, and just as we noticed it, a powerful storm broke out. Lightning illuminated the sky, and thunder echoed through the trees. We decided to leave the swampy area and head to a safer spot, but the only place we could find was near the Thomas family estate. I voiced my concerns to my partner, explaining that these people were unpredictable and dangerous, but he insisted that, given our official Forest Department vehicle, we were safe. He reassured me that we had nothing to fear from the Thomases. Though it was only 3:30 p.m., the sky was dark as night. I turned on the Jeep's wipers, wiping away the heavy rain, but something strange caught my eye. The water on the ground seemed to be crawling, moving away from us. I shrugged it off at first, but then I saw them. Snakes. At first, there was just one, then 2, then dozens. Soon, I realized the entire ground was covered with snakes, and they were all heading in the same direction, the Thomas estate. I tried to reason with my partner, but we both knew this wasn't normal. We quickly left the area, but what we had witnessed lingered in our minds. Days passed, and we pushed the incident to the back of our minds. But the unexpected happened one afternoon when the local police chief visited us. He shared disturbing news. The Thomas family had vanished. Only one member, the patriarch, had been found dead, his body grotesquely swollen and blackened, as if covered in hundreds of blisters. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was an overwhelming number of snake bites. When the police reached the Thomas mansion, they discovered the front door had been torn off, as if ripped from its hinges by unimaginable force. Inside, they found slithering marks on the floor. Snakes had clearly moved through the house, but oddly, no footprints were found. The only clue was a large pit in the ground. Despite searching the entire mansion, the rest of the family was never found. The bizarre details left us speechless. It seemed impossible that anyone could have attacked the Thomases, considering their wealth and power. My partner and I exchanged a knowing look. We both understood what had happened, and it was connected to what we had witnessed, the mass movement of snakes toward the Thomas mansion. Strangely, the police chief informed us that there had been reports from campers of strange, human-like figures roaming the forest. The descriptions were consistent, a tall, thin figure that seemed to move in the shadows. These reports were dismissed as the ramblings of people who were afraid of the dark, but the eeriness of the situation couldn't be ignored. As the days went by, the strange occurrences continued. Campers reported flickering lights and strange noises, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. One night, as I was patrolling, I felt an unsettling sensation of being observed, and though I glanced around, I saw nothing. Then, just before Halloween, I experienced something that changed everything. Around 10 p.m., I left my office to head to my Jeep, but as I walked, I once again felt that unnerving sensation of being watched. Turning around, I spotted a tall, thin figure in the trees. When I shone my flashlight in its direction, it moved quickly, but its joints seemed unnaturally bent, like they didn't belong. I froze for a moment, but I quickly got into my Jeep and sped off, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. The figure seemed to follow me. The next day, I confided in an experienced ranger, one who had spent over 20 years in the forest. He listened carefully and then asked me, "Have you heard of the Wendigo?" He explained that the Wendigo was a cursed spirit, always hungry, and it hunted humans in remote forests like this one. The ranger shared that every 5 years, the Wendigo would appear, and strange things would happen. People would disappear, animals would vanish, and the forest itself would seem to turn against them. At first, I dismissed it as another forest legend, but as Halloween approached, strange things continued. Campers reported seeing strange shadows, and some of the animals in the area began to act erratically. There were mutilated animal carcasses found, and even some tents were torn apart. Everyone was on edge, but no one openly admitted to being frightened. One evening, while working late in the office, I once again felt that sense of being watched. When I stepped outside, I heard footsteps behind me, crunching through dry leaves. I turned on my flashlight and saw the same tall, thin figure standing between the trees. This time, there was no doubt in my mind it wasn't human. I tried to run, but the creature closed the gap between us quickly. I felt something sharp dig into my leg, as though it were pulling me back. Looking down, I saw the creature's long, bony fingers sinking into my flesh. In a panic, I drew my gun and fired several shots. Miraculously, I broke free and ran to my Jeep, speeding away in terror. I crashed the Jeep but kept driving, desperate to get to the nearest hospital. The doctors were baffled by my injuries, particularly the bite marks that appeared human rather than animal. Though I claimed it was an animal attack, I knew deep down that what I had encountered was far beyond anything I could explain. For the next 4 years, I patrolled the same forest, but I never saw the creature again. However, the strange occurrences continued, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever face the Wendigo again. The eerie events that had begun with the disappearance of the Thomas family had shifted something deep within me. As a scientist, I could no longer deny that there are forces beyond human understanding, forces that science cannot explain, but which are undeniably real.